Hello, my name is Pastor Steve Estep, and whether you're watching one of these sermons from somewhere in another part of the world, like one of our deployed soldiers, you're a regular at Grace who just happened to miss last week, or you're just kind of checking us out, I hope you find the words of the sermon that you'll listen to today to be very helpful in your walk with God. May God bless you. Thanks again for visiting our site. Saying, you need to follow it. I can only imagine the conversation they must have had with their wives before they set off to follow this star. You're going to follow what? You're going where? We don't know. And you're going to be gone how long? Have no idea. So they load up their ancient equivalent of the SUV. See, we picture them as being men of means, which means when they started off on their trip, the likelihood was that they were not doing this thing on foot. They probably had the nicest ride they could get. And the ancient equivalent of today's SUV probably would have been a camel. So they load up their camels with food for themselves and fuel for their ride, and they set off on a westward direction following this star, going where they have no idea where they're going to go. But they're highly educated, and they're attuned to this other thing that's very important. They're attuned somehow to the reality that we were all created to worship. And they were going in search of the only king out there who was worthy of receiving everything they had to give him. So they set off. And their journey went something like this. They head west. They start following the star. They're gone for some time. Have you all ever gone on a trip, gotten too far away from home to turn back and remember that you forgot something? Don't you hate it when that happens? But there's a certain point of no return where you just know, I'm not going back. So I'm either going to buy something, a new one when I get there, or I'm going to learn to do without, but I am not going back. They had reached kind of that point of too far to turn around and go back when they had some transportation trouble. And one of their camels broke down. And wouldn't you know, if it was the weekend, and camel mechanics were few and far between. So finally, after much great searching, they found their way to a camel mechanic, and the news was not good. Because he said to them, here's your options. This one's in bad shape. It's going to take about a month for these parts to heal. Or, I have a brand new camel right over here. Now, lots of times when people are taking a trip, they have a little bit of contingency, emergency, just in case money that they take along with them. But nobody that I know ever has enough to buy a whole new ride where they go when they're going somewhere. But that's the situation they found themselves in. What are we going to do? We get to stay here for a month? Well, who knows if the star is going to hang out that long? We're on a mission. We're out to find the king who was to be born and worship him. Reminds me of a story that happened several years ago when I was pastoring in Missouri. We did a mission trip, domestic trip, to an Indian reservation in Arizona. Several people went. We drove our own cars and just carpooled and that sort of thing. And on the way back, we are middle of nowhere, New Mexico. And one of the guys behind me in a minivan starts flashing his lights, and he gets over on the side. So we all pull over, this whole convoy of vehicles that are anxious to get back home. And his car, it's not going anywhere. So we waited out there in that bacon, God-forsaken sun in the middle of the summer in nowhere, New Mexico, for a tow truck to arrive. They got there, took us to the closest town and to a dealership that was that brand of vehicle. They took it in, gave it a quick look, and said, not good. Blown head gasket. Had a lot of miles on it. You can either stay here for a long time, or we happen to have a whole bunch of new cars right over here. Fortunately, for all the rest of us, Dan Vasquez was in a good position to be able to go ahead and get a new vehicle. So before, sunset hit that night, we were back on the road, headed home again. But it reminds me that even when you're doing God's work, and even when you're following a star to find a Savior, bad stuff can still happen. Amen. Vehicles break down. Camels call it quits. It just happens. So they had a decision to make because they didn't necessarily have the time that it needed to wait, but they didn't have all the funds, not in their emergency fund, but one of them remembered that we do have some gold and some frankincense and some myrrh, and it's probably just enough to cover the cost of a brand new ride. So they thought about it a few minutes, and they determined, we really don't have any other course of action. It's not like this is something frivolous spending. This is a need here. We can't walk all the way there. So, all right, let's do it. So they get a new camel, and it's nice. I mean, it's updated. It's got everything on it. They make their way into Jerusalem, and as they're going through the streets of the city, everybody's like, ooh, nice ride. Look at that. They find their way to King Herod. And they say, we're here to find the one who was to be born king of the Jews. Can you help us out? So Herod summons the chief priest and the rulers and the folks that know the Old Testament. And he says, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. So I tell you what, when you find the new king, you come back and tell me where he is, because I'd like to worship him too. And they go on. They follow the star. It doesn't take them long when they get to the city to find the home where Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus are. And they arrive, and they're ready to give him their worship. And they step up to Mary and Joseph, and they present them with 3 empty boxes. Well, you see, we had every intention of giving you these gifts, priceless gifts, treasures, things that were valuable, would be meaningful to you. But we had this trouble along the way, and we had this need, and we had to take what we were going to give to you and get our own right, or we would not even be here now. But we're here. We're here to worship you, empty-handed, but we're here. And you guys know that's not how that story went. Here's how it went. Magi in the east, Gentiles representing all of us, outsiders who were invited to become insiders and drawn to Jesus, welcomed whenever they got there. They see this star. They take it as a billboard from God. They load up their camels with all their goods, their food for themselves and fuel for their rides. And they set off going to a place. They don't know where they're going or how long they're going to be gone. But they're in pursuit of the only king who is worthy of their worship. No trouble with their transportation. They're nearing the city of Jerusalem, and it's about time for them to stop and take a break, if you know what I mean. And they pull off the exit, and there's something they'd never seen before. This was this great expanse of buildings called the Jerusalem Outlet Mall. And they're like, hey, let's go check it out. We don't have stuff like this at home. So they go and start looking, and they're googly-eyed and absolutely in awe and mesmerized by all of the duds and the goods and the clothes and the jewelry. And the refrain is repeated. We don't have stuff like this at home. Never seen anything. And the prices here, can you believe this? I mean, we can get twice as much for what it costs us to get stuff that isn't even this nice at home. This is crazy. And they brought a little bit of money. You know, when you go on a trip, you got to have a little bit extra just in case something might happen, but not near as much as they would have brought if they would have known they were running into this. And then one of the guys says, hey, our wives really weren't too happy with us when we left. Probably smooth things over a whole lot, and maybe keep us out of the doghouse for a while if we brought them back something real nice from our trip. Great idea! So they start looking, they buy a few things for their wives and spend a little bit more than what they should, and they realize, man, we're out of money, but we really want some stuff for ourselves too, because we can't get this stuff just anywhere. And who knows when we'll ever be back here again. This is like an opportunity of a lifetime. You got to seize it or lose it. I mean, so what are we going to do? Well, we've got some gold. So they bought some things with their gold, and they bartered for their incense and myrrh. And it's a good thing those camels were the SUV version, because they loaded those babies down with so much goods you couldn't put another thing on them. But I couldn't believe what kind of sales they got. And then they make their way on into Jerusalem. When they're going through the streets of the city, people are impressed with their new digs. Look at those guys. They're styling and profile. They're looking good. Wonder where they got those things. Look at them, all those new clothes. And they go to Herod. Hey, we're here to find the one who was to be born king of the Jews so we can go worship him. You know anything about that? He summoned the chief priests, the elders, teachers of the law. They knew the prophets and said, yeah, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Tell you what, when you get there, you come back and tell me where he is, because I'd like to worship him too. They went on their way, following the star. It was over a house. They went in that home, and there was Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus, and they came to offer him their worship, and they presented to them 3 empty boxes. Man, we really wanted to give you some treasures that you would find useful and that really are gifts that are fitting for a king. But you see, on the way here, we came across this place, and we found all kinds of stuff that we really wanted. And I can't even believe we're saying this out loud, but we wanted stuff for ourselves more than we wanted stuff for you. So all that, you understand though. I mean, we never know if we're going to. But here we are. We're ready to give you our worship. Of course, that's not what happened. You know that's not what happened. That's not how the story went. Here's how the story went. Wise men, magi, educated, learned men knew that we are created with a heart to worship. They were drawn by God, Gentiles drawn to the presence of Jesus. They followed the star, lead their wives, load their camels, got their stuff. No camel trouble whatsoever. They saw that outlet mall. Will not be tempted by that. They made their way all the way to Jerusalem. They got into the presence of King Herod and said, Herod, we're trying to find the one who was to be born king of the Jews. Can you help us out? These are smart people. And no matter how Herod wanted to deceive them into thinking that he was really excited about the prospect of another king, they could see right through it. Yeah, tell me where he is when you find out, because I want to worship him too. And he walked out the room, and the three wise men looked at each other like, we are in some significant trouble right now. Because they could see it. And y'all know how wicked of a man Herod was. He was willing to kill to maintain his position. In fact, he did so. The next story that we read in Matthew chapter 2 is when Herod, they trick him because they come back by a different route. He realizes they're not going to show up. So he remembers back when the star first appeared to them, the time frame that they gave him, and he issues an order that all the boys in Bethlehem and the surrounding vicinity under 2 years and under were to be put to the sword. That's the king that they're in his palace right now, looking at each other like, I hope we make it out of here, because he's not a very good liar. And who knows what he's doing as he's out there right now. So when he came back into the room, one of them had the great idea, when you come into the presence of a king, what do? You bring gifts, right? We'll smooth things over, kind of like a bribe. But we'll make him feel good about himself, and then maybe we'll be able to slip out of here. So, they looked around. We don't have really anything to give this king except for some gold and some incense and some myrrh. That'll work. So they give it to him. They give the right gifts to the wrong king. Of course, we all know that it's not just a temptation of the first century to give the right gifts to the wrong king. In fact, I would guess that probably every person in here, starting with me, I'll say that, has had at least one time in our life where the best that we had to offer went to a king that wasn't worthy of it. And I'm not just talking about money here. The best time that we had to offer, we gave to another king. Well, I had every intention of being in worship, but, they scheduled this tournament for my kid, or they had this dance and this competition, and but there was this golf outing, and they had a tea time, and it was the only day that I had to sleep in. My intention was to give you the best of my time, but I gave it to another king. This was going to be the year that we, actually started honoring God with our money, because we knew we hadn't really been doing that, and Scripture calls us to and all that. And so we set out our minds that we were going to do it. But then we got in this situation where it was a choice between giving God what was God's and, doing for us what was us. And, surely he would understand that. But, I'm here. I'm here to worship. I'm empty-handed, but I'm here. And I'm empty-handed because I gave the best that I had to the wrong king. So they gave their gifts to King Herod, and they found their way to this little town of Bethlehem. The star was leading them, and they found that house where Joseph and Mary were with the baby, and they stood there. We've come to worship you, and we come with 3 empty boxes. See, what happened was on the way, we got ourselves into a jam, and we thought that we really needed to save our own skin. If not, we might not even be here right now at all if we hadn't done what we did. So surely you understand, but hey, we're here. That's not what happened. Take your Bibles and turn with me to Matthew chapter 2. Beginning with verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. For you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Isn't that a great story? These wise men, man, they had it together. These wise men were wise enough to know that when you have the right king, you don't have to be consumed with meeting your own needs. Even before Jesus said it, there was something they were clued into that, that they knew. Consider the lilies of the field, here today and gone tomorrow. If he knows how to clothe them, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? Every need we have, he meets. And what I want to remind us today is that when we've got the right king, we don't have to be consumed with meeting our own needs, because he knows how to do that very well. And the truth of the matter is, he does it better than we do. These wise men, pretty smart. They were wise enough to know that when you have the right king, you don't have to be consumed with satisfying your own wants. Even in a culture that's saturated with consumerism, materialism, grabbing, got to have more for me, myself, and my family. And I really wanted to do this for God, but I wanted that more. We don't have to live like that. Amen. And these wise men were wise enough to know that there is only one king who is worthy of our best that we have to give, and it's not me. I don't have to yield to the fleshly desire to have more. I knew this, I knew that, more of this, more of that. We don't have to live that way. The rest of the world may do that. The rest of the culture may do it. But wise people don't. We understand that when you got the right king, you can live for something a whole lot bigger than satisfying your own wants. These men, they're pretty smart. These wise men, they understood that when you have the right king, then no matter what other threats the wrong king may bring, it's never worth giving his gifts to the wrong guy. Amen. Here's the truth for us. We don't live under threat. We don't. What we live under is the constant temptation from every direction to take the best that we have and give it to the wrong place. The wrong king, the wrong team, the wrong account, the wrong store, the wrong whatever that will never be for us what the King of Kings and Lord of Lords can be and will be. These guys are pretty smart. And I think one of the things that this story does for us this morning is it brings us to a point where we really need to step back and reflect on what we've been bringing to God. I'm here. We need to be here. Our presence is important. But when you come to worship, do you come with empty boxes and empty excuses and I meant to's and I wanted to and I planned on, but, or do we bring our gifts to the house, having said no to I'm going to meet my own needs, having said no to I'm going to meet my own wants, having said no to this king really is, so that when we arrive, we give him the best that we have to give. What would happen if you were the person in the story? if your life and your attitude and your stewardship and your generosity was reflected in the Matthew chapter 2 story, would it have been 3 empty, or would it have been they presented him with joy, their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh? Pastor Alyssa's going to sing. And as she does, really what I'm asking us to do is just to be still before God and let him be real with us so we can be real with him. Maybe the truth is you haven't been offering God the best you have to give because it's been going in so many different directions. And 2013, as the new year is starting, God's saying to you, let's work on the ending of your story and make it different than it's been up to this point. Maybe you need to say to him, I'm sorry, God. I've been more consumed and concerned with me than I have with you. And I need to learn what it is to really trust you with everything that I am and everything that I have. I want to offer you my best. Tell you what, you be honest and you be obedient to whatever God speaks to you today. If he wants you to just talk to him where you're at, if he wants you to pray, if he wants, whatever God tells you to do, you do it, and it'll be good. But let's take these next few minutes and say to him, all right, Lord, what kind of response do you want me to have to the word today?